Half the Targaryens went mad, didn't they? What's the saying? Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin.
The dragon spawn were famous for losing their minds. They were dragon spawn and couldn't be allowed to survive. What would they grow to be? Was it a crime to put an end to a family of lunatics born of incest?
Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin.
Every Game of Thrones fan has heard some variation of this phrase. Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. Will they be normal or insane? It suggests 50-50 odds, but we can dismiss all that as anti-Targaryen propaganda, which I would never participate in. I've got 79 Targaryens in this family tree, so surely 39 and a half of them are not insane. But just how many Targaryens were mad? The answer is far fewer than half, and far fewer than you might think. First, let's look at the source of this propaganda. The first time we hear it mentioned is in Daenerys 6, A Storm of Swords. Sir Barristan Selmy tells Daenerys that he once served her grandfather, King Jaehaerys II. It was Jaehaerys who told Barristan that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin. Every time a new Targaryen is born, the gods toss the coin in the air and the world holds its breath to see how it will land. Jaehaerys II was the son of Aegon V and the father of Aerys II, and the nephew of Aerion Brightflame, so he's probably seen his fair share of Targaryens doing questionable things. But this quote is simply not true, and I will prove it by going through each generation of the Targaryen family totem pole. We'll start with Aegon the Conqueror, his sisters, and their children, Maegor and Aenys. Aegon did have prophetic dreams that prompted him to invade an entire continent with his sky nukes and kill a whole lot of people so he could be king of them all, for their own protection, when the mysterious northern threat he dreamed about appears at some unknown point in the future. But no, he wasn't insane. Rhaenys was cool, and Visenya was a warmonger, but not mad. Aenys was weak and nearly caused the collapse of his dynasty, only 2 kings in, but was generally a good guy and not insane. The first real candidate for Targaryen madness is his half-brother Maegor, son of Visenya. There are certainly some hints of insanity. It is rumored that when he was given his first sword at the age of 3, he immediately butchered a cat with it. He also had the opportunity to try to bond with a young dragon hatchling, but chose to remain dragonless and waited until his father died so he could take Balerion the Black Dread, the only dragon worthy of him, he said. He pissed off his brother and the faith when he started doing polygamy. He had 6 wives throughout his life and believed that Targaryens were above the laws of common men. After Aenys died, Maegor came out of exile to take the throne from Aenys' son Aegon, who he kinslayed. Some people suggest that Maegor's madness began after he experienced head trauma during his trial of 7. He was in a coma for 30 days until a sorcerer named Tyanna, who he also married, revived him. He then spent years waging war against a faith militant and generally being cruel, like when he murdered all the craftsmen who built Maegor's holdfast, so no one but him would know all the castle's secrets. Maegor was tyrannical, murderous, cruel, but he wasn't mad. There was a reason for everything he did, however cruel it may be. Quickly moving through Jaehaerys and his children, we can see that the Targaryen family was very sane during this period. The most insane act by any of them is when Rhaenyra's 12-year-old daughter Aeria escaped Dragonstone on the back of Balerion, the dragon who killed her father, Aegon the Uncrowned. Aeria had a difficult relationship with her mother. Her only friend, Alyssa Farman, left her alone on Dragonstone. She was replaced as Jaehaerys' heir by his daughter Daenerys, and generally, she just had a lot of angst and grievances. She was depressed, not mad, and didn't deserve the painful death she experienced from her travels on Balerion. Jaehaerys and Alysanne's only children who lived to adulthood were Aemon, Baelon, Alyssa, Daella, Sarah, Maegella, Vaegon, and Gale. 8 sounds like a lot, but they had 13 children, meaning 5 of them died very young. They were all normal. Sarah had promiscuous teen years and a major falling out with her parents, so she spent her life in pleasure houses in Essos. Some maesters or septons might call her mad, but really she was just independent and liberated, just vibing in some brothels. Rhaenys was cool. Viserys was an idiot who caused the downfall of his dynasty's dragon power, but other than that, there wasn't really anything wrong with him. Daemon was murderous and often at odds with his brother the king, but never did anything too questionable. Perving on his young niece, making jokes about his brother's dead baby, murdering a Braavosi so he could marry his betrothed, beheading Vaemon Valerion for saying the strong boys are bastards, hiring Blood and Cheese for a bit of infanticide, and kinslaying his nephew in a sick display of dragon parkour, all that is pretty on brand and non-insane for the rogue prince. There was a method to his rogueness. Some might say that Aegon II went a bit mad during the Dance of the Dragons. He was always gluttonous and gropey, but after the Battle of Rook's Rest, he got addicted to heroin for a while, and after his fight against Baelor and Moondancer, his legs became useless. He started to spy on people doing sex, and then prayed for absolution from Septon Eustace. He got sad and weird, but not insane. Some people also call his daughter Jaehaera mad, and that is one of the dumber things I've ever heard. She witnessed her twin brother get beheaded, and then her other brother was murdered by a mob, and then her mother committed suicide, and then her father was poisoned. Then, at the age of 8, she was forced to marry Aegon III, the son of the woman who fought against her father. She grew slowly, showed zero emotion, and was probably just traumatized or on the spectrum. She wasn't mad. Say it with me, people. Unwin Peak sucks. Next, let's look at the two disappointments who were Aegon III's sons. Daeron I took the throne at age 14, promptly invaded Dorne, and died 4 years later at age 18. We have no idea how well he might have ruled. All we know is that he was ambitious, a very good military commander, and a bit egotistical, given that he wrote an autobiography of his conquest of Dorne, and believed his war was important enough to warrant the deaths of over 50,000 people. The kid was an idiot, but not mad. Baelor the Blessed is the first Targaryen who I believe was actually mad. Luckily for his subjects, Baelor's madness took the form of religious piety instead of violence. He walked barefoot through the dangerous terrain of Dorne. He let himself get bitten by vipers in order to save his cousin, Aemon the Dragon Knight. Then he locked his sisters in the Maiden Vault so he wouldn't have an urge to incestuously procreate with them. He outlawed prostitution, making all the sex workers and their children homeless. He had a vision of a huge sept on Visenya's hill, so he began to actually build it. He tried to replace the ravens with doves, gave tax exemptions to lords who put their daughters in chastity belts, and perhaps worst of all, he burned countless books in the kingdom which disagreed with his views. He got so horny that he fasted to erase his impure thoughts. He appointed first an illiterate stonemason, and then an 8-year-old child as the new High Septon, and finally starved himself to death after his sister Dana gave birth to a bastard boy, Daemon Blackfyre. Baelor did plenty of good during his life, but anyone who fasts for 41 days and kills himself is mad. Viserys II was king for a bit after Baelor died, but he was a good administrator, not crazy. His son, Aegon IV, is sometimes called mad as well, but I view him as a less cool version of Maegor. Cruel, sadistic, violent, gluttonous, but not insane. The weirdest thing he did was try to recreate dragons by building them out of wood and placing wildfire propulsion mechanics inside them. This did not work. The worst thing he did was legitimize all his bastards before he died. This gave his bastard Daemon, the boy he gave the sword Blackfyre to, a reason to start the Blackfyre rebellions. Aegon IV was an unworthy tyrant, but all his cruel decisions were made of sound mind, which makes someone like him and Maegor all the more dangerous. They don't need to be insane to act with cruelty. It's just the way they are. Aegon's siblings, Aemon and Nerys, were sane. Aemon a great warrior, and Nerys a frail but gentle lady. The children, Daeron II, Daenerys, and Daemon Blackfyre, all seem normal. Daeron II was one of the better kings in Targaryen history, And while Daemon Blackfyre was a bit bloodthirsty, he wasn't insane. The other bastards all seemed normal as well. Bloodraven and Shiera Seastar were the weirdest, just a couple of incestuous sorcerers, one of whom became a tree wizard, but neither were mad. Of the next generation, Rhaegel, the third son of Daeron II, is called mad, meek, and sickly in the Hedge Knight. He would prance naked throughout the halls of the Red Keep. In the World of Ice and Fire, a history book written by maesters, Rhaegel is called a sweet boy touched by madness. So I guess George is telling us that Rhaegel is mad. But if dancing around naked is the worst thing he did, it's just not that serious. Reluctantly, I'll count Rhaegel as the second mad Targaryen. Rhaegel's children were Aelora and Aelor. They married each other, but Aelora killed her brother in some mysterious, grotesque mishap. Aelor's death made Aelora mad with grief, and she ended up committing suicide after being assaulted by 3 men. Mad with grief could really mean anything. Maybe the trauma of accidentally killing her brother actually turned her insane. Or maybe it was just normal grieving behavior. Not enough information to make a judgment, so Aelora will not count as mad. Her cousin Aerion was mad though. Including Baelor the Blessed and Rhaegel, I believe Aerion is the third mad Targaryen. He was always cruel and douchey. At a tourney, he broke a girl's fingers because her puppet show made the Targaryens look weak. For most of his life, Aerion reminds me of Dany's brother Viserys. Hot-tempered, arrogant, and he liked to call himself a dragon. However, he exhibited signs of madness in adulthood. He moved to Lys and had a son, who he named Maegor, after the Cruel. The same year, he died screaming after drinking a pot of wildfire, believing it would transform him into a dragon. No sane person would be that delusional. It's possible Aerion was visited by dragon dreams, which began to infest his mind and make him believe he must become a dragon, thus turning him mad. Or perhaps he was always mad, and simply got madder over the years. Aerion's brother Daeron was a known dragon dreamer, and rather than making him a madman, the dreams made him into a depressed alcoholic. He was a good guy who was plagued by dragon dreams. He died of an STI. His little brother Aegon V was also plagued by dragon dreams. In fact, it's possible that every son of Maegor had dragon dreams, according to Maester Aemon. Egg spent his youth as a squire for Sir Duncan the Tall, which made him appreciate the small folk when he became king. His social reforms were seen unfavorably by the lords, but obviously Aegon wasn't mad. However, Aegon's later years were consumed by a search for dragon lore, believing that he must bring back dragons. This culminated in the tragedy of Summerhall, when he and many members of his family died in a dragon hatching attempt. It's possible that this was just a mistake. Or, there are also theories that Aegon was trying to do blood sacrifice to wake dragons. Since we don't know for certain, we can't say he was mad. Innocent until proven guilty. Everyone else in the family is relatively sane, until we reach Aegon V's grandson, Aerys II. Aerys became known as the Mad King, so of course he's mad. As a young man, he was forced to marry his sister because his father, Jaehaerys II, spoke to a woods witch, who told him a prophecy that the prince that was promised would be born of Aerys and Rhaella's line. Daenerys is of their line, and so is Jon Snow, if Rhaegar is Jon's father. Aerys was a handsome prince who was best friends with Tywin Lannister and Steffon Baratheon. There were really no signs of madness in his youth, just typical Targaryen douchebaggery. For example, he made unwanted sexual advances towards Joanna Lannister. When he became king at 18 years old, he wanted to become the greatest king in Targaryen history. He spoke about invading and conquering the Stepstones, building a second wall north of the first wall to make the kingdom larger, building a white marble city by the Blackwater because King's Landing smelled so bad, building a fleet of ships large enough to defeat the Braavosi, and building an underwater canal in Dorne to bring water to the deserts. These ideas are ambitious to say the least, and are definitely some warning signs that Aerys might not be fully on his rocker. Over the years, Aerys became more and more paranoid and erratic. When his infant son Jaehaerys died, he beheaded the wet nurse, believing she was responsible. Then he changed his mind, believing his mistress and her family were responsible. So he tortured and executed them all. Then he had a sudden change of heart, and after speaking to the High Septon, he swore off all women except for his wife Rhaenyra. When he gave birth to another son, Viserys, the paranoid Aerys made the Kingsguard stand over the baby day and night. Not even Queen Rhaenyra was allowed to be alone with him. By this point, Aerys was sliding rapidly into madness, but after the defiance of Duskendale, he plunged irrevocably into the abyss. Lord Darklyn of Duskendale captured and imprisoned King Aerys for 6 months, until he was rescued by Sir Barristan Selmy. Captivity at Duskendale had shattered whatever sanity had remained to Aerys II, and later in his life, Sir Barristan thought he should have left Aerys to die so that Rhaegar could become king. The whole story would be different if Barristan didn't save Aerys. For example, Daenerys would never have been born. Aerys believed that his hand, Tywin, was conspiring to kill him as revenge for denying a marriage between Cersei and Rhaegar. Aerys thought Tywin arranged the death of Steffon Baratheon, and believed he was next, so he only met with his hand in the presence of all 7 Kingsguard. He was so afraid of being murdered that he didn't attend Rhaegar's wedding to Elia. Aerys became increasingly paranoid that Rhaegar was trying to stage a coup against him from Dragonstone. In this, he was actually probably right. Rhaegar might have used the tourney of Harrenhal as an excuse to discuss his plans to force his father's abdication with the Lords of the Realm. When he speaks to Jaime before the Battle of the Trident, he says, "When this battle's done, I mean to call a council. Changes will be made. I meant to do it long ago, but, well, it does no good to speak of roads not taken. We shall talk when I return." So it seems Rhaegar was plotting to take control away from his mad father. By the time of the tourney, Aerys had stopped grooming himself. People were shocked and appalled at his long yellow fingernails, his tangled beard, and ropes of unwashed hair. He would go from cheery to melancholy in the blink of an eye, and would sporadically laugh, weep, rage, and brood. Aerys hired the Pyromancer Guild to create enough wildfire to destroy King's Landing. He said he'd let Robert be king of the ashes. As Jaime says, the Targaryens burned their dead, and Aerys meant to have the greatest funeral pyre of them all. The entire city would be his pyre. So yes, long story short, I'm marking down Aerys II as the 4th Mad Targaryen in history. Next, let's consider Dany's brothers, Rhaegar and Viserys. Rhaegar was super into prophecies, and believed his son Aegon would be the prince that was promised. His affair with Lyanna Stark is very murky, but taken at face value, they ran off south together and made Jon Snow at the Tower of Joy. That's a pretty erratic decision for an already married crown prince to make, but it's not enough to conclude that Rhaegar was mad. Just prophecy obsessed. Viserys is often said to be mad. Barristan Selmy hints at Viserys' madness, saying, "Even as a child, your brother Viserys oft seemed to be his father's son, in ways Rhaegar never did." He abuses Daenerys, considers himself a dragon like Aerion Brightflame, and ultimately had a similar death to Aerion, being burned alive. But I don't believe Viserys was truly mad, just unhinged after years of trauma. Think about what he went through. His entire family was killed in Robert's Rebellion. He was left in charge of raising his little sister as they traveled to free cities in exile. He had to sell all their possessions to keep them alive, and was reduced to begging for anything he could get: shelter, food, swords. Daenerys loved Viserys too, despite the abuse. Viserys smiled and lowered his sword. That was the saddest thing, the thing that tore at her afterward. The way he smiled. So Viserys wasn't insane. He was petty, impatient, abusive, and incompetent. His behavior was never anything more than that of an arrogant beggar king. Ser Jorah put it best when he said, "Viserys could not sweep a stable with 10,000 brooms." Daenerys turning mad is one of the oldest A Song of Ice and Fire theories out there, dating long before Season 8 of Game of Thrones. We don't know if this will happen in the books. George hasn't confirmed it the way he's confirmed other things, like Aegon's prophecy, or Bran becoming king. So let's look at the other Mad Targaryens and see if there are any similarities in Dany's story. Baelor was zealous and kind to a fault, letting others take advantage of him and starving himself to death. Daenerys shares Baelor's willingness to help others, but she goes about it in a much more violent way. She goes on a crusade against slavery and kills the masters. Baelor would have avoided killing anybody. Aerion was just an insufferable poser, but he did have dragon dreams, just like Daenerys. Except Aerion's dreams convinced him he must transform into a dragon. Dany's dreams convinced her that she already was a dragon and simply needed to awaken it, resulting in her blood sacrifice in the Dothraki Sea. Her father, the Mad King, was paranoid and cruel above all else. He believed the entire world was his enemy, but Dany sees the world as her people and her purpose. She's motivated by freeing people from slavery. If she was paranoid like her father, she wouldn't let herself be seen amongst the people as often as she does, like at the fighting pits, or when she frees the slaves of Yunkai. When a Targaryen goes mad, they go mad in a way that's in character. For example, Aerys II was always suspicious of other people threatening his reign. This eventually manifested in becoming agoraphobic and burning people alive who he believed were plotting against him. Baelor the Blessed was always a zealot and fasted on occasion. But after Dana's birth to the bastard Daemon Blackfyre, he fasted so long he killed himself. So if Dany were to go mad, intentionally burning the entire city of King's Landing isn't what she'll do. The core aspect of Dany's character is that she punishes evil people severely, like the slave masters, while defending the oppressed and the innocent. The citizens of King's Landing are innocent smallfolk. Whoever lives in the Red Keep by the time of Daenerys' arrival to Westeros, whether it be the Lannisters or even young Griff, the boy who says he's Rhaegar Targaryen's son, they will be Dany's enemies. And since we know about wildfire being stored underground, maybe when Dany attacks the Red Keep, she'll accidentally set fire to the innocent folk of King's Landing. Depending on when the long night begins, this may be when Dany flies north and sacrifices herself and her dragons for a cause that benefits humanity, as a way to atone for her misuse of fire and blood in King's Landing. That's just one theory though, and doesn't involve Daenerys going mad. I don't know whether she will or won't go mad, but if she does, it won't be a Bell-activated microchip in her brain that causes her to do so. Let me know if you agree with my assessments of the Targaryen family madness, and how you think Dany's story will develop in future books. Thanks for watching and subscribing.
When they write the history of my reign, sweet sister, they will say it began today.
Dany, please!